am thrilled to have with us today Suzette Kent, who is the former federal CIO. And today we're going to be talking about actually a recent article that Suzette published about some of the big changes happening right now in federal tech and in federal workforce. So we invited her to come talk to the talent community of interest, which I am the industry co-chair of. I partner with Javier Inclin, who is with the National Science Foundation, Office of Inspector General. And so we are absolutely delighted to have Suzette with us. Just a quick note, we will be doing Q&A throughout this conversation. We want this to be very conversational for everybody. So at the bottom of your Zoom, you should see a chat function. We don't have Q&A, we will use chat. So as we go, feel free to just throw questions into chat. I'll be watching and we'll go from there. So a quick note on myself. I am, in addition to being industry co-chair for the talent community of interest at ACT-IAC, I am a former senior executive from OPM and had a 25-year federal career. It was absolutely wonderful career. Couldn't have asked for a better one. Got to work with the Federal CIO Council on issues associated with closing skills gaps because IT has always been mission critical, right? So I now serve as Chief Industry Advisor for Public Sector at Qualtrics. We are a data collection, analytics, and decision-making platform that empowers agencies to maximize efficiencies when they deliver essential services to citizens and employees. So think customer and employee experience. That's what Qualtrics does, and I am privileged to lead our public sector work there. So let's go ahead and get started. Suzette, for anyone on the call who hasn't been around since you served in the federal government, can you tell us a little bit about your career? What led you into government and what role you played there?
Yeah, well, and first of all, thank you for asking me to join the team here today. I know that some of the best conversations and real work comes from small group discussions, and I know we'll talk about it later. But I actually wrote that article because I was passionate about, we're doing a whole lot of things, but we can't forget one of the most important things, which is the workforce. And as Sydney said, I was honored to serve as the federal CIO in the Trump 45 administration. But to make this short so we can really talk about things, I have spent my entire career as a consultant, as a business leader, and then moving into federal government, using technology to improve business and provide better services, products and services, just kind of really simple there. And the opportunity to improve how government use technology and serve some of the most important missions like in our nation and in our world that's kind of how I ended up in government. So I'll cover my mouth when I say almost 30 years or 30 years in this space, but I did learn a couple things. And very specifically, these statements apply to both public and private sector. When there is significant technical debt, there is often significant knowledge debt. And sometimes I found inside government, even when we had great tools, we had absence of pathways for continuous learning and upskilling to use those technology tools. So, we'll talk a little bit about some of the fantastic tools, but when you have the tool, if you don't have the knowledge, and not just the IT staff knowledge, but those who are applying the capabilities, if you don't have that knowledge, you don't get the value out of the tool. And in my experience, they're amazingly talented members of the federal workforce who I watched with some of the programs that we put in place, seize opportunities to learn new skills and equip themselves. But we have to keep doing that, and we have to make it not just a one-time project. It needs to be deeply embedded in the activities of bringing emerging technology into the space. And I know that's some of the stuff we're going to talk about.
That's great. So, you've already made the business case essentially for why workforce matters when you're looking at large scale tech transformation. Um, I wonder if then you could, and what you say in your article is we need to invest in skills, right? And it's not enough to just hire people in, they also need to be able to keep up, right? And
Yeah.
that's where you have ongoing, like you're saying, sustainable investment in workforce capability. I wonder if you could focus in on the business results that
Mhm.
government organizations will, and like you said, it's not just government, right? And maybe it's large scale organizations, however you want to define it. What can they specifically achieve with that kind of training investment?
Yeah. Well, when we go into anything, it's any type of technology transformation, it's because we want to do something better, right? And what is better? So, lower costs, more effective in the rendering of the service, the production of the product, the mission, in government, the reduction of errors. There are lots of examples, again, public and private sector, where when we are doing things manually or with antiquated capabilities, that we get things wrong. It actually costs more to fix those errors, less manual work, more mission work. I'd actually say and I shared with Nancy for sharing kind of after this, there was an interesting study in 2020, and this was a little bit focused on AI and automation, but it actually said if we don't upskill and invest in the skills of the individuals when we deploy advanced technology, we actually not only hamper performance, in some cases, we create other problems.
Yeah.
So you're kind of advancing the ball, but if you don't invest in the workforce, not only do you not get the value, but you created problems. And for everybody on the phone, I want to kind of there's a lot of chaos, right? A lot of stuff going on right now. Um, but I want to kind of walk through a little bit of the why, right? Our workforce is the core of every one of the missions that happens in government. And we have said the activities underway, our government is aspiring to have a leaner federal workforce, reduce dependence on contractors. They want to maximize the value of some of these commercial, kind of off the shelf, hardened platforms that work, globally and can be used across many different agencies for common purposes. And there's been repeated focus on wide scale enterprise use of automation, AI, and data. When you stack all those together, if you don't talk about the last piece of the puzzle, which is the workforce that knows what to do with all that stuff, and they know how to behave in that environment, you're not going to achieve those other things. So, to your point of outcome, all the actions that we're taking to get to the outcome, we have to pay attention to that last foundational linchpin, which is taking the people who understand the mission and making them capable, competent, and proficient even on those new tools, and make sure that they have a pathway to continue to enhance their skills at the pace that the technology is changing.
Yeah. And so at the very same time, right, that you're pointing this out, we see a lot of people losing their jobs. And certainly we can expect that, as with any budgetary constraint environment, right, we're not going to see a lot of investment in training. um, so how, and yet at the same time, right, we're hearing that there's testing going on about how we can introduce AI and especially agentic AI into the federal technology ecosystem to make things more efficient and more effective. So, those feel like contradictions, right? Like we don't have money for training, but we're introducing this, like you're saying, this technology that requires a new set of skills. Um, how might organizations make the business case, right? For whoever is in charge, right? To really focus in on those skills. What should that business case look like?
Yeah. So here's some of the things, and as we go into this, I'm not even talking. I'm going to use examples that are not hypothetical. They're things that I have done in different places and roles. I think we mentioned in the beginning. I work with many technology companies, and now and in the past, I particularly, Mitch, I work with Skillstorm, and the reason when I left government, I started working with them was this exact question is what is a sustainable model? But the same thing with many of the those who may be listening who are um, software and hardware vendors. I work with those teams as well to say, how do we make this thing work, and what's the knowledge that goes along with it? So how do you do it at a project level? We do a lot of work around justifying an acquisition and like what we're going to get and what's the ROI and what are the expectations, but take that and take it down to an individual performance level and a measurable level for people. So I talked about like things, what do I want? I want less backlog. Well, what does that mean? I want more throughput. What does that mean? Does that mean somebody used to work 10 cases and now they work 50? Does that mean that a particular set of activities used to take 2 weeks and now it takes 2 days? Go to that level of precision so that you understand what the expectation is and align what your training needs to be based on that expectation, and make that part of this goes with the initiative. Ask vendors. One of the things that I've done in the past too is ask those who are delivering the technology what a literacy assessment tool might look like
Mhm.
in the actual acquisition. Now that applies to tech roles a lot better. Like if I'm going to use this, what does my team need to do and be able to handle, and kind of what's that level of proficiency as we go forward? That's a way to make it tangible. um, Give target skill sets or target levels of understanding for those who are going to be using the technology, and
Mhm.
make that part of your organizational deployment, not just those who are doing, hands on keyboard, doing the work, making the thing work, but those who are going to be using it. Make that part of the organizational things that you expect in performance, and that you outline in performance, and maybe you even reward, or you tie kind of moving to another level to achieving those types of things.
Mm.
Talk with the vendors and consider how you align that employee training, maybe to their capability release schedule. I know every company is like saying we're going to, and you see that in the acquisition. When are new capabilities coming on? What does that look like? Keep that dialogue going, and include that in how you are planning kind of what your employee year might look like. And the last thing is, it may seem simple, but it's a bigger thing, is potentially engage a partner for continuous upskilling of employees. And if you're doing kind of your own internal, um, here's what we think, the skill set is for our whole, our tech stack, whether that's our team or our user side. What's a partner that can help keep those things fresh, that can do that in alignment with their everyday work, aligns with adult learning, all those kinds of things that I know you probably talked about lots at OPM and others have considered. But do those intentionally up front
Yeah.
with part of the acquisition. So, because you're doing a couple things, you're making sure that the funding is there, but you're also signaling that you only achieve that expected ROI with the commensurate investments in the people who are going to use the technology. And it gets more important, actually, it's harder when it's automated capabilities.
Yeah, that's great. And that actually echoes a comment I just saw in the chat from Steve Kraus. And by the way, congratulations again, Steve, for getting the Fed 100. The award ceremony is tonight. Saying maybe what we should be calling this is change management instead of training, right? Like maybe that's what it's about.
Well, you see my words and some of this stuff. It's continuous learning.
Yeah,
It's continuous learning, right? That is actually something that should be part of all of our jobs. Again, especially in this space, because when I stop, when I do, then I am limiting my ability to be successful.
right. Exactly. And so Colin Waite, also in the chat, is pointing out that part of this, then, what you're really talking about is bringing in a partner or capability to do user experience testing throughout the development process, right? As opposed to training, or maybe in addition to training. And so, yeah, I'm really interested in your perspective on that, especially from the perspective of where employee listening comes in, so that you can understand where are they starting, where do I have to get them, and what do they think is the best way to get there.
Yeah, and maybe I'm being very attentive to words. I think the user experience we apply when we're creating and designing and thinking about how something should work. Um, I think one of the kind of this conversation, I'm going to separate those who are doing the technology work and those who are using the technology into two kind of different learning buckets. Those who are doing the technology work at the point of acquisition, we know what those skills need to be, right? It's not even necessarily about an experience, it's about proficiency. Where
Okay.
do I have to be proficient? What do I need to know? What are the skills that I need to have? And that understanding in the acquisition and then reflection against the workforce to say, do we have what we need and how do we get them there? We have solved it in the government in the past by the contractors,
Yeah.
right? Or we have solved it by what we asked some of the vendors to bring in. And we can still do all those things. But to sustain it, those capabilities need to be embedded in the federal workforce. So we need to be intentional about it. And I work with I work with a lot of vendors now, and sometimes I'll hear people say, "I'm not using the technology. Like it could do so much more, or we didn't get to where we thought.
Mm.
Why?
Mhm.
Why did that happen? Right? Why did that happen? This is often because we don't go that last mile. We don't finish that last piece of the puzzle. Then I'll separate, I'll go back to the point that is a little sometimes more about experiences, that user side. So when I'm deploying something, um, did I make the right investment in ensuring that those who are using the capability know how to use it? Um, the one of uh, uh, the things that I shared with Nancy, and anybody can actually find a lot of the actual applied use cases and case studies from deploying automated technologies. If those who are receiving the information and the output from an automated process, if they don't understand where it came from and how it happens and trust the data that's in it, they don't achieve the efficiency with that. They don't engage. And I know it's going to sound trite. Everyone on this call, I hope they have already heard this. They probably did, but some of the baselining reports and information that's coming out are showing that it's continuing to emphasize that AI doesn't take away a job; it changes jobs,
Mhm.
and automation, and the people who are augmented, their job is augmented, in all cases outperform an individual alone or AI alone.
Yeah.
Not, you can like I said, find, any of those statistics. And in watching that happen, what I take away from that is that the most efficient workforce is a person augmented with, the automated tools means they have to know how to use it.
Yeah, exactly. So how do you know, right? So how do you measure the skills and then measure the effectiveness of the training that you're putting people through to enhance those skills?
That's the tough question, right? And we probably have a lot of folks on here like, um, it, 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 you, there are different ways that that's done right now, right? You can, you see, simulations, you see proficiency tests, you see, I'm kind of I like the practical, right? So there's a lot of things that are some, basic tools and testing. There's sometimes in many of the vendor cases, they will, they have tools that you can use. Considering that we have an adult workforce, and a deeply knowledgeable workforce, those things that actually have a practical application and give feedback on how well someone did at applying that knowledge are usually the things that work the best.
Yeah,
But that takes thoughtful development, right? You don't just like get those out of a box.
yeah,
Again, sometimes depending on the product or service, some of those, can come along with, but the things that I've seen where those are best done is when they are done by the receiving organization and there's some type of mission or business context around that. And then individuals, can self-assess. There is a role for HR, and there's a role for HR in understanding roles and the basic expectations of those roles kind of at this level of precision. Again, it's easier when it's a technical job. It's maybe a little bit different from a user perspective. But, and this is the real number I saw on some job postings, 230 something percent increase in job postings that mention a level of proficiency with certain kind of automated tools and AI tools. So that's kind of happening too, is that you signaled to individuals to do well in this role.
mhm.
You need to have a level of understanding or proficiency. And I think we will continue to see that expand.
So I don't want to get nerdy HR-ish on you, Sue, but as you've been talking, I've been thinking, wow, what does this tell us then? And maybe you worked at OMB long enough, and with the White House long enough, or yeah, with the White House and perhaps OPM long enough to know how complicated our human resources management systems are, including the ways in which our position descriptions and our occupational classification gums up our ability to flex to emerging skill needs, right? Can you tell us a little bit
You're
about
making me
your
sad.
experience with
You're
that?
making me sad, Sydney. Okay, so I'm gonna do this in reverse. And in the ideal future, right? A person's profile is a set of is a set of skills, not I had this job, then I had this job, then I had this job. Because what is happening in every single industry is that the combination of capabilities a person needs to do a thing is changing more rapidly. When we have a system that does not support that flexibility of skills, either both for an individual to collect them about themselves or for somebody who's looking to fill a role to be able to look across those things, dynamically, we are doing a disservice to both those seeking employment and the person who might be a better fit, right? Giving them an opportunity. And what I mean by that, when a job is just kind of a flat, somebody was in this job at this level,
Yeah.
that's not very informative. So when we talk about many of the antiquated systems and processes,
Can we talk about HR?
we're going to talk about HR. We should be talking about HR. Those are in there. And I had a really cool opportunity to talk to both somebody at LinkedIn, but also somebody that was from the largest payroll provider in the United States. And that conversation sometimes was about the disconnect between how a job is advertised and then what the person actually does. And the data that was in between there was a little bit more salary and like ranges and things like that. But the crux of the conversation was also kind of tracing. It was in the same kind of conversation about, new AI skills. It was also saying that people that had skills, provable skills with leading technologies generally ended up in moved through job levels faster and oftentimes ended up with a higher compensation opportunities and were considered for roles and things like that. So just again reflect back to more opportunity, um, better fit, and a direction that we need to figure out how we enable the federal workforce to follow.
Yeah. So what you're talking about is skills as essentially the glue, right? That connects investment in training with performance outcomes.
Mhm.
Um, and we often think of those as two different things. I mean, certainly in our HR systems, our learning management systems are separate from our employee performance management systems, for example. So, and we're talking about tools and we're talking about automation. What are your thoughts on how we could potentially strengthen the connection between training and performance?
Yeah. So I think some of the ways that as I mentioned before, that we strengthen that is actually assessments and accomplishments tie that more to perception of performance. Make it a requirement. Um, Also look at it as a qualifier, for other types of roles. And when we talk about skills versus performance, I almost look at, if I expect a level of performance, it will not occur now in some cases unless there is a base level of skills. So almost in reverse engineering the question of, if I expect this business outcome, it is a requirement that I have a proficiency of these skills. I can demonstrate, a level of proficiency at these skills. Otherwise, you're gambling. Sometimes they're folks who are great, learners and self-taught, but that's not a way to have a high reliability of an outcome.
Yeah. And so that's the point you made earlier, right? Is that when we are acquiring or developing these tools, we have to bundle into the requirements the skill set that we
Correct.
need to expect in order for the tool to work.
Well, and right, I'm going to use a corollary, right? I don't advertise a job for a chemist without skills in chemistry.
Yeah.
I don't say I don't have a job for a doctor that doesn't have a set of, medical, behind it. We in as we look at, and I use the corollary with accounting, sometimes it's one of the professions where we know the rules change, we know things change. They actually have, and even in government, right? They have a path of continuous training. They have things that are we need to shift that kind of paradigm to how we think about technology and those using advanced technology, because it is changing at that pace, and you are not going to achieve the business outcomes that you expect if you don't keep that same pace, again, with those who are doing the building and those who are doing the using.
Mhm.
So I think that's an opportunity. And because we are making the investments in the technology now, right? This is a different discussion when you're using legacy technology. But that's why it again, back to I'm getting like all charged up again. The reason I did the article is, if we're gonna do all this, we cannot miss the most important piece, which is enable everyone to use it.
Yeah. So on all this, right?
Yeah.
You sat at that enterprise view. I mean, a unique view in the world
Mhm.
of technology in the United States federal government across the whole thing. And so as you look at that landscape today, right? What's the this that we need to build? What are the major gaps in capability, in technology capability that you think we should be just closing as fast as we can?
Well, I think that if we're kind of looking at where we sit today, sorry, somebody's doing something interesting. If you hear that background noise in the location I am, we have major gaps in data skills, right? The how-tos of applied AI, um, at the operational use. You hear everybody saying they have something in AI, but oh, I'm sorry, that's what the windows are being cleaned. If you see a shadow, that's what the noise is. Um, but the so tactical, hands-on applied AI. I saw, in the comments they said change management, but I would say this: the ability to adapt to rapid change without fatigue and fear.
Hmm.
I think there's a lot going on right now, and it is difficult, especially, again, I'll say, in cases of legacy technology, when something has been in place 10 years, maybe 20 years.
Yeah.
Maybe the business process has been around since, let's say, 1970s, and I can point to a couple of them that I saw in government. That's not a lot of change. Um, and so not only do we have to be comfortable embracing the change, understand that, especially in some of these cases, it's going to be changing every 6 months to a year. And that will occur if we want to maximize the opportunity that's out there. And then the thing that we've been talking about, we don't have a sustainable pathway for continuous learning, that where we have tools, it's tied to measures and measures that matter to performance, and we don't tie it to rewards. We don't tie it, we don't incent people, to do that. I thought it was very interesting. It was pointed out in a couple of articles that a lot of people who, a lot of people are choosing to go do this themselves on the side,
Yeah.
right? I think that's something that you shared,
Yeah.
um, when we were kind of talking and prepping for this, is that government employees, actually, many of them figured out how to use AI tools on their own.
Uh-huh.
And that's phenomenal initiative, but
Yeah.
it's also, right, we got a lot of stuff around safely and securely handling, government data and that kind of stuff. We should do it intentionally, and provide those pathways for the entire workforce, especially when we are making major strides to implement tools, um, that bring all those things to bear.
Yeah. So it's a really interesting example you just brought up, right? And that was Qualtrics research that found a third of, well, first of all, government is lagging significantly behind all other industries by 27 percentage points in terms of employees saying, yeah, I'm using AI at work, right? So we are way behind the rest of the world, the rest of industry in the United States and the world. And like you said, right, those who do say that they're using AI are actually reporting they brought in the tool themselves. They found it themselves because they don't want to wait. And they're recognizing the power of this.
Yeah,
And so
I want to say,
I
like
know
the
it's
cyber
scary.
and data, that, like, some of the folks on the phone, that makes me really shifty.
It's
Um,
scary. It's
right,
scary.
there's a lot to talk about there, but it's also kind of making the point that when people have an opportunity to do something better,
Yeah.
they're motivated to try to find that better way.
And to learn something new, right?
Mhm,
And so
mhm.
that's what gets to this question of how do you create a sustainability pathway for continuous learning that measures something like I went out onto the internet and took a MOOC and got the basics of AI, and I did a really quick video snippet on how to use this particular AI tool. I taught myself, right? How do I get credit for that? How does that then fold into how we do that sustainable learning?
Yeah. Well, again, I'll go back to being intentional, right? I think at whether it's an agency level, whether it's I'm going to pick again, I'm going to pick the CIO shop, or I'm going to say maybe an operational shop. They first have to decide what's that set of desired skills and capabilities that are going to be recognized, and then what are the sources for which those are going to be recognized. Again, I mentioned some of the different groups that I work with. There are lots of places, there's a reason why you can get certified in certain technology, and they are from very specific sources, because that that is an agreement from the technology provider, and that content is sufficient
Yeah.
and acceptable and appropriate to be able to represent a level of proficiency with that. So I think you have to be intentional there. I mean, I could go out and find all kinds of things, um, but you want to make sure kind of it again. It is in it is in alignment with what the agency wants to achieve, what their goals are, and it's in alignment, and it is recognized kind of with the quality is recognized with the provider of the technology. But you asked another question, kind of that's inherent in that. Somewhat of what I'm saying in the article is that I hope that we ask ourselves, as we're moving this technology, what is the responsibility of the government agency and that team in funding that learning pathway to make sure that that happens, which means they have to be intentional in defining, here's the skills that you need, here's the skills we expect you to have, this is the timeline, and by the way, this is what you're going to do long term if you're going to be in this job and continue to do this thing. That takes work,
Yep.
and so we have to make that work a priority, along with leveraging, fantastic new capability.
Yeah, and so what I'm hearing is a new budget process, right? Maybe
I'm
not.
not saying a new budget process. I'm saying something that's included and intentional in
Yeah,
that, and
yeah,
is directly tied to the ROI. It's tied to it is part of the ROI.
yeah,
I actually don't know how sometimes you think you're going to get an ROI if you don't make a level of investment in what you're implementing.
yeah. But I love that idea, right? That when someone like you, a CIO, sits down and says, "All right, I'm making this investment in this new technology," that part of the budgeting for that in government, it includes what do my people need to know, and where do I get that skills, right? So that they can actually effectively execute the tool I'm investing in.
Yeah. There's probably some folks who are listening who are, some of the vendor side of the community. And I can say this in my years as a consultant, I could implement the exact same technology very, very well, and sometimes see organizations achieve different outcomes. And that was often tied to how they rolled it out and how they managed the change and how they communicated and what skills building. I mean, like I said, I'm not even going to say the darn word training. What skills building
Yeah.
and preparation they did with their employees before that thing happened, and it directly impacted the efficiency, the return on investment,
Right.
and the achievement that they received from that massive investment that they had often made. And I think that's what we're talking about here. Again, we're in a time where we're intentionally choosing to make significant changes to things that haven't changed in many, many years, this has got to be a piece of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. So change management is not an add-on. It's an integral part of how you actually make that investment. Yeah.
You, you got I I was I was doing a really simple analogy with somebody else. I was calling it the pitcher and the catcher, right? Like if I'm pitching the ball, you've got to have somebody that's ready to catch it.
Yeah.
Otherwise your game's over.
Yeah. Yeah. Really good. So we're coming up on time. I wanted to make sure we give plenty of time for folks to jump in with their questions. So I wonder if we could wrap up with you giving some free advice to people on the phone who, might be in CIO shops, might not, but certainly this is a government and industry audience.
Yeah.
What advice and suggestions do you have for those teams?
So I'm gonna pull kind of some of the stuff that we talked about before, prioritize and plan upskilling and skills development with the people who are impacted by new technology with the same precision you put behind selecting the technology. Think all that stuff we do up front.
Yeah.
Let let's keep it rolling all the way through. Look at the areas where the functions and the supporting technology have really large footprints across government, and maybe prioritize, look to use maybe the councils or things like that to do to actually take on some of this. What do we need to build? How do we need to do it at the enterprise level? So whether that's training, upskilling, or COEs that you can leverage across multiple agencies. I know, right? I had experience with the CIO Council, the Chief Data Officers Council, the CISO Council. I even went to the CFO Council a time or two, the Acquisition Council. I know that those are great groups and they have a lot of opinions. Interacting with those to say kind of where are the common things that we don't have to build alone, especially I know somebody made a comment in here about the small agencies, especially smaller agencies, where can we leverage things? And I would put forth the challenge to expand the use of expected proficiency levels in jobs.
Mm.
Like what, and when you do that, you're making a commitment both ways. You're making a statement that I know I need to have someone that is at this level of proficiency to achieve the outcome that I want, but I also have a role in helping them get to that level of proficiency.
Yeah.
So there are ways, there are sources, there are that lots of different things. That's sometimes an HR discussion, that's sometimes a capability discussion, maybe an individual, other kinds of things. But right now, there isn't anything.
Yeah.
And if we do that, we're setting an expectation that is tied to achievement of the outcome.
Yeah. I like that because as you were listing off all those councils, I mean, I served on a lot of those councils. Um, and my brain goes to, wow, that sounds really bureaucratic. And that's what we're trying to, it's what we're trying to avoid. And we're trying to kind of reset the spirit of government, which gets to one of our first comments. Shara Roman, I hope I pronounced that correctly, apologies if I didn't, is talking about mindsets and,
Mhm.
and behavior change. So it's, we've talked in this conversation about skills and proficiencies and, what does the tech profession in government actually have to know now to drive this huge, very rapid transformation forward in an agile way, right? This isn't a bureaucratic process. This is just get going, get change happening. And that does take a different mindset and set of behaviors. So what are
Yeah,
your thoughts on how we can approach that?
yeah. Well, right. They always say culture is the hardest thing to change, right? And that doesn't matter what industry, what area that you're in. But moving from um, the we have to change. We have to embrace that we're in to be able to again leverage data and automated capabilities at the pace that we want, and to be innovative and all those things that we're saying we want to achieve, we have to couple that with a continuous learning commitment. And to again, to achieve the outcomes, you have to figure out how you continuously learn, you continuously upskill, you have a pathway to build and expand skills.
Mhm.
That's a different culture.
Yeah.
And in some cases, kind of when you got to a role, you did a thing, and that was like the right, I'm at the pinnacle, and now I can, I'm going to do that particular thing. Um, there weren't any real mechanisms besides some of the professions, right? We have lots and lots of professions in the government, right? So I'm not speaking um, broadly, and some of those professions do have continuous learning pathways. We don't necessarily have it in technology and operational use of technology in a way that is has a mindset, a financial funding, an organizational commitment that matches the technology that we want to use now.
It sounds like you're describing a professional association,
Well,
maybe?
w- um, I- not not necessarily. I'm describing again, being intentional and matching the what you expect
Yeah.
of a professional orientation, um, that is that matches to the goals and outcomes that you want to achieve. If I want to achieve certain sets of things, again, I can directly relate that
Mhm.
to the capabilities I need to have in my organization. And I'm not necessarily going to achieve one if I don't invest in the other.
Yeah. So in my language, right, because I come out of talent and learning, I would describe that as an organizational core competence, right? What you're saying is the day is gone,
Continuous learning, right?
right? Continuous learning. And so we need to recruit for that. We need to assess, potential talent for that. And we need to train and, develop, I would say develop
Yeah,
instead of train when it comes to this kind of attribute. It's really an attribute,
yeah,
and reward.
yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yep. Yes, and we'll close off with a couple of things. There's if you actually look at the number one job skill right now that's kind of in a lot of the is critical thinking
Yeah.
and commitment to continuous learning.
Nice.
It doesn't matter what you want to do. Doesn't matter. It those and in a way we are talking about some of those things. It is a significant change of mindset, and in all those actions that you talked about, the other thing you can do is create a pathway, whether that is by in an agency, it is with a partner, it is tied to, maybe it's with the provider of certain sets of solutions. All of those are options. All of those have, you know, instances that are in existence right now. So you can kind of look and say, hey, where's the examples? Um, but put that in place in alignment with the project initiative that you're taking on,
Yeah.
and make that part of, like I said, the precision of acquisition through the precision of ensuring your people readiness.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, and this applies to everything. So my wheels have been spinning thinking, what we're essentially saying is the job of government is that kind of technology-based agility. Because
Mhm.
we work in a technology ecosystem. This has been known. Right? It
Yeah.
is how it's going to be from now on.
Yeah.
How do we build that into an understanding of the work of government so that people who want to come in realize that's what they're signing up for, right?
Right. It it's when you look at whether it is a and I've used this example even when and I saw some of the folks who were on here, even when I had the pleasure of working directly with many of you, it doesn't matter if you're a farmer or a war fighter or a researcher or, somebody at the IRS answering questions, the way that we interact with citizens, adversaries, patients are now is largely technology driven. And especially during COVID, with many of the agencies, we watched their service percentage tip over to more digital
Yeah.
than in person.
Yeah.
And it has stayed that way. There's all this question of, oh, is it going to go back? Didn't go back.
Yeah.
Didn't go back. So it is our path forward.
Yeah.
So we should get good at it.
Yeah. Yeah. Really good. Well, I love that as your final word. Let's get good at it, guys.
Let's get good at it.
So I do want to be respectful of everyone's time, give everyone a chance to take a water break. I'm learning how important it is to drink water all day when we sit at our keyboards, speaking of technology. So we'll go ahead and wrap it up. I want to especially thank you, Suzette, for joining us. The talent community of interest with ACT-IAC is very focused on how do we support the workforce, and specifically, how do we create a sustainable environment where federal employees are productive, they are supported, right, and they are valued as key public servants who do a lot for this country. So I appreciate you giving us your insight and experience on that. And
Thank you.
yeah, looking forward to maybe having you join us again. That would be great.
Absolutely. It'd be my honor. And thanks for all the folks who spent some time thinking about this today because, right, you got it. Changing culture is hard. And I think we're all agents of that change.
Yeah, perfect. All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you at the next one.
Bye. Thanks.